don't fall asleep. Words made famous by actress Heather Langenkamp back in 1984. I'm Chris Stanley and welcome to Filming Locations, A Nightmare on Elm Street. November 9th, 1984. Horror maestro Wes Craven brought us A Nightmare on Elm Street and introduced us to the razor-handed maniac, Fred Krueger. The film was a box office and critical success. With an estimated budget of $1.8 million, it went on to gross over $25 million in the United States box office alone. What drew audiences in was the film preyed on two things we all need and have: sleep and dreams. Visually horrifying and beautifully crafted, Elm Street 1 paved the way for an entire franchise. Freddy became a household name, and as the series progressed, he became somewhat of a jokester, but his purest and evilest form lies within the celluloid of the original 1984 film. After nearly 34 years, the film is still regarded as a game changer for the horror genre. The making of the film itself defied all odds. It put New Line Cinema on the map, and not to mention kickstarted the careers of some famous faces. But today we're going to be going to some of the filming locations right here in Los Angeles, now made famous by this little success story of a film. Our first stop is 20 minutes down the road, a little street called Genesee Avenue. Just off Sunset Boulevard is 1428 Genesee Avenue, otherwise known as 1428 Elm Street. Now this house right here served as the Thompson household in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, not to mention the Walsh household in the second Nightmare on Elm Street. This house is beyond iconic, not just in the film industry, but also the horror film industry. Now originally, Wes Craven and the production crew wanted a street that emulated the Midwest of America, and even though this is just off Sunset Boulevard, it's pretty clear that this street doesn't have that typical LA vibe to it. Now if you are thinking of purchasing this house, it goes for a cool $2.5 million. Now this location right here actually acts as a double whammy for movie locations. Right across the road there is the house of Glenn, played by Johnny Depp in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. So it is geographically correct, even though they did use a soundstage predominantly for the inside of this house. Now this would be my fifth visit to 1428 Genesee Avenue, and I've never met the owner or owners of the house itself, but I do know of certain people that have come by this house. The owners have come out, been very friendly, even shown them photos from shooting back in 1984. With our first location down, it was time to move on to our second. Situated 25 miles away in the suburb of Brooklyn Heights, this location served as a setting for Rod Lane's funeral. I'm standing here out the front of the Ivy Chapel in the Evergreen Memorial Cemetery. Now, in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, this set the scene for Rod Lane's funeral after he met his demise at the hands of Fred Krueger in his jail cell. Now, there's a famous, beautiful wide shot of Heather Langenkamp sitting right there on the third step. She's then comforted by her mum Marge. She is taken to the car, which is geographically correct, just over there by that headstone. John Saxon then comes over, and then they realize that something is not right. Nancy is talking about the same guy that Marge and Donald burned years ago. This cemetery is quite beautiful. It's striking to look at. It's a beautiful day out here. Now, apart from the Ivy Chapel as a location, we also tracked down the area where Rod's burial was held. And after a 5-minute search, we found the site. Now, according to Wes Craven in the DVD commentary of the film, this scene was actually the first day of principal photography. This cemetery definitely does have a creepy aura about it, but it has a beautiful calmness to it. I've never seen anything quite like it. Another interesting fact, this graveyard is actually the oldest cemetery here in Los Angeles. Our next stop is actually just a few miles down the road and is the setting for where Fred Krueger would take his victims. So I am standing at the front of 421 North Avenue, Los Angeles, otherwise known as the Lincoln Heights Jail. Now, this location served as the boiler room for Fred Krueger. Some of the most iconic scenes in the first film were filmed down here in the boiler room of the jail itself. Now, the jail was subsequently closed in the 60s. It has now been condemned because of asbestos throughout the building and also the boiler room. The building itself was closed in 1965. Now, in 1951, the unprovoked beating of several prisoners occurred in the prison on what came to be known as Bloody Christmas. Now, unfortunately, being condemned, we do not have access down to the boiler room. And from eyewitness reports, the lower level of the boiler room itself is submerged in 2 feet of water. And honestly, just being at the front of the jail is enough for me. My mind can't help but wonder at the spectacle it must have been back here in 1984, with the cast, crew, all at the front, and of course Robert Englund in his full Freddy makeup and wardrobe doing his shtick. These comparison photos are courtesy of ThenNowMovieLocations.com and are an amazing insight into just how much the boiler room has deteriorated over a span of nearly 34 years. It was now time to head to our next location. Situated only 6 miles from Lincoln Heights, this setting is where we're first introduced to Tina's friends, Nancy, Glenn, and her boyfriend Rod. I'm standing at the front of John Marshall High. Now, this location was used for all the exterior shots of Springwood High School. Most notably when we see Heather Langenkamp, Amanda Wiss, Jesus Garcia, and Johnny Depp all walking together for the first time, talking about Tina's dream. The second time this location was used is when after Nancy burns herself after confronting Freddy in the boiler room, she runs outside and notices that she has a burn on her arm. Now, if you look over here, you see that the front has changed quite drastically. There is a massive glass awning covering that beautiful front of the high school, which is what we're trying to pick up. Because you know what? Things happen, things change, locations change. It's been 34 years. You have to expect something like that to happen. Now, whilst trying to conduct myself in a professional manner throughout this documentary, it wouldn't be a proper trip to this location without emulating those creepy jump rope girls. Now, whilst this was used for an exterior location, the interior location for when Nancy's in class is actually John Burroughs Middle School. Boom! Bonus location for you guys. This is John Burroughs Middle School. So like I mentioned, back at John Marshall, which is only 6 miles away, this is where they filmed all the interior scenes of Springwood High, including when Nancy sees Tina for the first time in that bloody body bag, and also the very infamous scene, who could forget,
hallway.
Interestingly enough, when Nancy follows Tina's body down into the boiler room, they cut from this location going downstairs straight to the Lincoln Heights Jail on the other side of town. Our next stop is the Katcher Institute for the Study of Dream Disorders. Our next stop is the American Jewish University. Now, this doubled as the sleep clinic that Marge takes Nancy to towards the end of the film to figure out exactly what is going on inside Nancy's head. Although this location was only used for the one establishing shot, the building itself is quite stunning while standing over the City of Angels. All of the interior scenes were either filmed in an actual hospital or the old sound stages of Desilu Studios, otherwise known today as Paramount Studios. With time against us, we were now moving on to our final location for the day. Located on Santa Monica Boulevard, this heritage-listed building served as the precinct for Lieutenant Donald Thompson. Acting as the 5th precinct is the Cahuenga Branch Library, built in 1916. This location heavily features in the scene where Nancy tries to warn Rod of Freddy in his jail cell. The The interior of the jail cell was all filmed in the soundstage whilst cutting back and forth to this location. As for the interior of the reception desk of the police station, from what we can gather, it was filmed at an actual police station somewhere in Los Angeles. With the day coming to an end and the sun setting, we still had 2 more filming locations to go, all within the same area of Venice Beach. But we wanted the rising sun to accompany us for this final trip down memory lane. Venice Beach, home of the last 2 filming locations. Our first pit stop is located a mile from the beach, where Glenn gives Nancy some sound advice on how to defeat Freddy. This footbridge is located on the Venice canals and was used for a tender scene between Nancy and Glenn before she prepares for her final showdown against Krueger. I have honestly never seen anything quite stunning as the Venice canals. I've never seen these before. Usually, I've been to LA several times. I've never seen anything like it. Absolutely amazing. I can definitely see why they chose this as a filming location for Glenn and Nancy. So unfortunately, we are coming to our final location for this documentary. This last location is the setting for one of the most memorable scenes in the entire film. I know I'm gonna have a fanboy moment, but that's what we want. This is what it's all about. This is fanboying at its best. I'm standing out the front of 620 Millwood Avenue. Now this served as the residence for Tina Gray. Now whilst only the front of the house was used for the establishing shot with Tina, Glenn and Nancy having a slumber party, it's behind the house that I really want to check out, because again, this area is actually geographically correct, with the actual backyard of the house being used for when Glenn goes out to see what that ruckus is that turns out to be Rod. So what we're going to do is head around the side of the house, around the back where there's an alleyway. I'm going to show you guys where one of the most infamous scenes in the film was shot. This is absolutely crazy. I've just got to the alleyway where they filmed the infamous arm scene where Freddy has his arms stretched out, horrifying Tina. He then takes his glove and scrapes it against that fence right there. Honestly, I'm still trying to take it all in, because I grew up with this film. This film is my childhood, this film is my adulthood, and being right here in the same location where this infamous scene was filmed, still trying to get my head around it. I mean, Jen, where you're standing right now is where Robert was on standby, Wes yelled action, and then his silhouette was cast against those doors right there. It's eerie. I know it's early in the morning, but it's really eerie, quiet, and beautiful. So from the front of the house, the backyard, all the way out to the alleyway is all within continuity, which I think is brilliant instead of switching locations. Keeping with the theme of professionalism and integrity within this documentary, Jen and I thought it would be fun to recreate the chase sequence down the alleyway. Now this very disturbingly artistic shack behind me was actually used when Nancy is searching for Rod. She goes through the door here and then they cut back to the Cahuenga Library that acted as the 5th precinct. And with that, I reached maximum fanboy level. I can't fully explain it, It's a wave of emotional highs and lows. This location was seriously by far my most favorite to have visited. I didn't want this experience to end and I didn't want to go. But come on, we all know I'll be back. And there you have it, the most iconic filming locations from one of the most legendary and influential horror films in modern history. Now, what did I learn from this experience? What did I gain from trekking around La La Land exploring houses, graveyards, schools and jails? Well, if anything, my love for what Wes Craven created over 3 decades ago has grown fonder, with a new sense of respect for him, his amazing cast and crew. In the face of adversity and possible financial ruin, it just goes to show you that passion and persistence truly does pay off. Since finishing this project, I can honestly say that I've never been more creatively happy. Visiting these locations was somewhat of a recharge that I needed, a reality check, and of course, countless fanboy moments. This couldn't have been made possible without my dear friend and producer, Jennifer. Thank you for pushing me. The Elm Street movies aren't just horror films. They represent the coming together of people from all over the world. Whether you're passionate about acting, filmmaking, prop making, or costuming, there's always a common draw with these films. I'm beyond thankful to have met some amazing people because of this franchise. What you have just watched is my tribute to Wes Craven, a man whose vision and guerrilla filmmaking style inspired me to get into prop making, acting, and filmmaking. And of course, the fans. At the end of the day, we all live and breathe this stuff. We want to know every skerrick and every detail of these films. We're loyal, passionate, and always using our imaginations to the best of our abilities. And at the end of the day, if these films have inspired you to go out and do something like I've done, then that, my friends, is the stuff dreams are made of. No pun intended.